Uh, if you don't know the writing of Neil Stephenson, you should learn. I'm so excited to have a chance to have this conversation. Extraordinary expressions of possible futures, mixes of social change and technological change in an absolutely bewildering array of times, spaces, and places. And we're here to talk about the future of storytelling. So let me bring up Neil Stephenson. Thanks very much for coming.
It's good to be here. Hi.
So you're someone, in all kinds of ways, with nanotechnology, with swords and sorcery, all sorts of things, creating futures out of whole cloth, out of the way you think and view the world. And here we have a room full of folks who are required to begin creating futures and legends around the futures for their organizations themselves out of the, how's that? Is that better? Out of the stuff of the real world. So what might you be able to share from your process to help them with their more sort of real world version of creating alternate futures?
Well, I think that we're storytelling animals. I think we evolved to be storytelling animals, sitting around the campfire, exchanging experiences and learning from each other's stories. And so at the heart of any future, any sort of science fiction novel that you might want to tell, there has to be a yarn. There has to be a ripping yarn that kind of draws people in and gets them interested in turning the page and finding out what happens next.
And so how might somebody thinking about this from the point of view of a company or a product or even themselves potentially go about it?
Beg pardon?
How might somebody thinking about this from the point of view of themselves, a company, a product, actually go about finding that yarn, finding that story that might be interesting?
There's no recipe for it. There's I wish there were. It would make my job a lot simpler, but it's one of those things where you kind of know it when you see it, and I think we see it sometimes in some simple marketing campaign that'll come up where suddenly there's a character or a story that you identify with, and then you're kind of off to the races.
So I was actually surprised when I was preparing for this session to see something you'd written about innovation and management. And you actually wrote in that article that too much information is counter to innovation, and you think that we're actually getting into a time where innovation is being strangulated. We've got a bunch of folks here who talk about big data and innovation as if they go hand in hand. But you seem to think the contrary.
Well, I think if you look at the way decisions were made in big government or corporate environments, say a couple of generations ago, it was just assumed that you couldn't know everything. So, for example, during the Manhattan Project, there was a lot that they didn't know about how to do what they were doing, and they had to sort of use their intuition and their gut to kind of make the best judgment as to what was going to work and maybe hedge their bets a little bit by doing multiple strategies. And I think that the general atmosphere in big organizations was quite accepting of that and forgiving of that. When you've got the illusion that all information, all data is available, then there's no excuse anymore to get it wrong and to make the wrong call, to sort of back the wrong horse. And I think that sometimes makes people quite reticent to try new ideas.
Do you actually think companies should restrict it? I mean, sort of the same way they restrict water around, grapevines to make them more bursting with juice?
Yeah, I could imagine, doing, setting up a retreat where decision makers go off into a place with no internet and just try to decide what they're going to do based on what's already in their heads. So I think you could set up artificial situations that would enable you to make decisions that way. But I think that that maybe a simpler approach is just sort of from the top down to create a set of expectations around management that it's okay to try things. It's okay to see what to make a decision or make a call based on maybe less than perfect information.
So another one of the things you've written about a fair amount lately is that there was a generation of speculative fiction, futuristic fiction, from my boyhood, I guess, that was optimistic. It was about all the amazing things that could be in incredible futures, whether there were issues, bad guys or whatever.
Yeah.
And that recent futuristic fiction has been apocalyptic and dark and very somber.
Mm-hmm.
And you feel that that's something that we should work very hard to change, to turn.
Yeah, I think part of it has been the influence of media science fiction. I think that if you're an art director in a film, or if you're trying to produce art for a graphic novel, say, that it's easier to take the existing environment and degrade it and smash it. It's easy to build a model of Manhattan and have it wiped out by a monster or an alien invasion than it is to try to envision what a completely new city in the future might look like. So I think a lot of it's media driven. I think that in books still there's a pretty strong constituency of writers who are producing somewhat more optimistic stuff. But you can't, there's a kind of coolness factor that you buy by playing the dystopian apocalyptic card. That still has some currency in that world, and it's kind of it's kind of an easy way out, I would say, and to my mind, it's becoming a little bit overdone.
Now, you actually are working along these lines, right? You've got a project Hieroglyph.
Yeah.
That's all about bringing scientists, engineers, and fiction writers together to create more optimistic and practical seeming kinds of stories. Am I right?
Yeah, this emerged from a conversation at a conference between me and Dr. Michael Crow, who's the president of Arizona State, on this very topic. And what emerged from that conversation was the idea of trying to start a science fiction anthology that would feature innovations that are sufficiently near term that a young person graduating from engineering school today could read one of these stories and say, you know what, this doesn't exist now, but if I start working on it today, then by the time I retire, maybe it could actually have into existence. So my contribution to the anthology has been a story about building a tower 20 kilometers high.
That kind of thing? Was that one of your projects?
I'm having trouble with the monitors, so I couldn't quite hear you there.
Involved in near space exploration?
Oh, yeah.
With Jeff?
Yeah, so from about 1999 to 2006, I worked at Blue Origin, which is a private commercial space startup in the Seattle area. They are, in the early days, it was a more exploratory kind of project, and in the more recent years, they've been working on developing an actual launch vehicle that would, it's oriented towards space tourism, and it would be, it would take off, and sort of throw people into space and enable them to enjoy some weightlessness and then come back down to Earth. Yeah.
I actually saw a video, I think it was just this week, there we go, of a rocket, private rocket taking off and then landing back down. So in the lifetime of most of the folks here, you think that's something we might see?
Oh yeah, I mean, there's going to be an active space tourism industry very soon. It's already there in a very expensive form. that's accessible to only a few people, but easily within a few years we're going to see multiple carriers out there who can take customers into space for at least a few minutes and let them experience, the view of Earth from space and experience weightlessness. And I imagine it'll still continue to develop from there.
And I'm curious, is there one other among these, royal of technologies that are out there, nano and virtual and all those, that you think is really going to reach out and grab people here relatively soon, change things?
Don't laugh at
So in terms of things in the digital internet universe, or more the
Sure.
physical, I mean, I've kind of given up on trying to figure out what's going to happen next on the internet. But in terms of physically building stuff, this is not a terribly original thing to say, but 3D printing, so-called additive manufacturing, is going to be an interesting contributor to people's ability to make things over the next few years. And the printers are getting reliable enough and cheap enough that ordinary people can have them.
Yep, in fact, we heard about that some earlier today, and we're going to be hearing more tomorrow about the impacts of sharing economy and the sort of new kinds of efficiencies that come with that. We could go out and have my dinner with Andre and talk for hours, but I'm afraid that's all the time we have. Now, as I said before, if you haven't read, one question, we got just a couple of seconds. Yeah.
Yeah, when it's ready. Yeah, I'd like to go up there. The question was whether I would like to engage in space tourism myself someday, and I definitely want to do that. Yeah, thank you.
On that note, thanks for the question. We've got to wrap it up. Thanks very much.
The whole room, and I was like,